So in reading Jeffers, he lays out 10 categories, if you will, by which he compares and contrasts Greco-Roman slavery to early American slavery. And for time's sake, I really only have one that I really want to hit home on, and that would have to be the attitude towards slaves. That's where our change, our fundamental change should come, where we are able to take off the spectacles of early American slavery and take on the spectacles of Greco-Roman slavery. And I think that really helps us to see what Paul's trying to get at. A big thing to understand was that early American, they didn't see the African American people as a people. They didn't have personal traits that were employable. And because they didn't have traits, they weren't capable of anything, really, in their view. Very stark contrast to Greco-Roman society, where they said, when they conquered people and they took them in, they said, hey, you guys had your own country, essentially. You have traits that are employable and you're capable. And what I'm getting at is this. I want to illustrate this a little bit more. Early Americans, we saw a two-way divide that was not able to be passed, and that was that one of those divides was form and the other one was nature. And so no matter what, the master to slave relationship, the slave could never be like the master. It never be considered a part of the master's house, just a piece of property, I'm sad to say. But in the Greco-Roman society, what we need to understand is that line that separated masters from slaves was permeable, and that line was merely status. And it was the desire of the people, and they had the capability to move within their class, and even moving upwards as well. That's another can of worms. It's what causes Douglas Moo to say that Romans 6:15-23 ushers in this idea of moving from the old master to the new master. The old master being sin and death, new master being, he says, obedience leading to righteousness. And what he says later in 22 is that the master is God, who leads us to holiness and eternal life. I thought that was interesting because over here he says sin and death. I would expect obedience and life, and in a roundabout way, that's exactly what he says. Coming back over here, another interesting part was that slaves during that time had a legal platform. That if they were abused, they were actually able to force themselves into slavery under their owner and be taken on by somebody else. But in early American society, that wasn't the case. If they were not treated well, they probably were killed. So, and I say that because what Paul says is that through the law, we're awakened to sin, and sin being a master. And we're able to see the two masters, sin as opposed to God. And we're able to see the abuse that we sit under here, and able to look at the life from afar that God offers. And it's what causes John Piper to say that there needs to both be the desire and the decision to make this movement to be in the household of God, to be to have God as our master. Moving back to this side, and what we cannot see through this view is just how involved slaves were in society. That in early American slavery, they merely survived. They merely survived in a similar way that people merely survived the Holocaust. But in Greco-Roman society, changing your master, being under a new master, could actually cause you to thrive. And I think that's really Paul's big point here. And what we see is that in God's economy, when God's our master, we're made to thrive and not just survive.